Bonjour mes amis, je m'appelle Tito, je fais des vidéos sur les finances personnelles sur mon autre chaîne, mais sur cette chaîne je parle d'autres choses comme aujourd'hui où je vais revoir le film Kesari.
When Kesari, a spiritual being from ages past who fights against injustice, is reincarnated in present day, he joins a gang of robbers and vows to steal the wealth of the corrupt rich in society and distribute it amongst the poor. However, a determined unit of law enforcement officers led by Officer Folawiyo is determined to stop Kesari and his men for good no matter what it takes. Kesari is directed by Jagun's director Tope Adebayo Salami and the film's star Ibrahim Yekini, aka Itele.
Les performances. The selling point of this film, at least for me anyway, was the fact that it had so many actors who were in Jagun in it as well. The lead of the film, of course, Ibrahim Yekini, aka Itele, he plays Kesari. Also, Femi Adebayo and Lateef, who were the stars of Jagun, they were in this film. Debo Adedayo was in the film. Odunlade Adekola was also in the film, and Kola Ajeyemi as well. I think I even saw Dele Odula and Adebayo Salami in the movie too. So that's like 8 people who were in Jagun. And I remember seeing the poster of this movie, I think the weekend that Jagun came out, or a few days after. I saw the poster at the cinema. I was like, these guys have already done another movie together. That was really quick. But I was convinced because of how good Jagun was rather, that I was going to see this film, and I ultimately did. I think Kesari came out like 2 weeks after Jagun. Now, the actors that weren't in Jagun but were in this film, they include Kevin Ikeduba, the lovely Bolaji Ogunmola, Yvonne Jegede, Boma Akpore from Big Brother fame. But Boma is he's a decent actor who's done a lot of work. If you've researched the guy, so he was in this as well. Who else was in the film? Deyemi or Okanlawon was in this movie. Is it me or has 2023 been a bit quiet, for Deyemi or Okanlawon? Because we're used to seeing the guy in pretty much all the big films, like in 2022, 2021, but this year, I think it's probably because he's really focused on a few really big projects that really demand his time. And I guess it's given other actors, an opportunity to shine, because Deyemi really used to dominate once upon a time. Now, the issue with the performances in this film, right? The performances weren't great. Let's establish that. Acting was quite tacky. Quite tacky by general contemporary standards, but by Yoruba Nollywood standards, I think it was okay. Remember, I said in my Jagun review that Yoruba Nollywood is a world on its own, right? Where a set of different rules apply. And another thing about the performances in this film, the characters, none of the characters really stood out individually. We don't really get much of their backstory or who they are. They only really exist just to support the main character, or to make the main character Kesari look good. I liken it to Fast and Furious and how many of the characters in that franchise, particularly the ones in Dom's group, they only exist to make Dom look good. And Dom is the lead character played by Vin Diesel. We don't really know much of the backstory of each of those characters, right? So it's a bit hard to really evaluate or to feel any kind of affinity to any of the main characters. There were some good performances based on the little screen time that some actors had in the film. Femi Adebayo's character, Officer Folawiyo, yes, he was really good. He was the typical boisterous, very determined, very fiery Femi Adebayo. He does that a few times, but I've never seen Femi Adebayo play a law enforcement officer, so that was refreshing for me. Adedimeji Lateef was also funny in this film. Adedimeji Lateef is a very well-rounded actor. He can do drama really well, like he did in Jagun, and he does comedic acting very well too. And we saw more of the comedic actor in this film. He did give us a few laughs in the cinema with his character Water, I believe his character's name was. And then Kevin Ikeduba was also refreshing to see. I often forget that Kevin Ikeduba can speak Yoruba. I heard him speaking Yoruba in this film, and I was like, wait, he speaks Yoruba? And then I remember that he was in Swallow, which was also another predominantly Yoruba film. Bolaji Ogunmola was also nice to see as the love interest of Kesari. So yeah, ce que j'ai aimé. Don't get it twisted. This movie, Kesari, was tacky, it was silly, the acting was not great, but somehow I managed to be entertained. And once again, I liken it to the Fast and Furious movies. You know how you watch those Fast and Furious films and you roll your eyes so many times at how ridiculous certain things are in those films, right? But somehow you still manage to be entertained by in spite of the silliness of it all. That's how I felt with this film too. The second thing I liked about this film is that it did not waste my time. Yeah, it wasn't too long. Because it's one thing to watch a bad film, it's another thing to watch a bad film which also wastes your time. Ijakuma. But this film didn't do that. It respected itself and it stayed under 2 hours. I think it was like around an hour and 40 minutes. Ce que je n'ai pas aimé. The fight scenes in this movie were quite poor. The punches and the kicks were not really landing, and generally the fight choreography in this film, nothing to write home about. Also, the costuming in this movie, costumes were laughable at certain points. The officers, the law enforcement officers, they had bulletproof vests that were so small, sometimes they look like bibs. The costuming in this film was just something else. The editing too was not fluid. When they moved from one scene to another scene, it didn't really gel. The sound editing I didn't take note of much, but the background music, in many instances while watching this film, the background music it didn't feel appropriate for the visuals, what we're seeing on screen. They just didn't seem to gel in a number of instances. The plot holes in this movie were abundant. For example, there's a big historical book that is introduced to the movie, and Femi Adebayo's character, Inspector Folawiyo, he comes into possession of it, and there's a whole thing about how he reads the book and him keeping an antidote next to him while reading the book. They make a whole thing, a fuss over this book, right? But they don't tell us what the role of this book is and what he's meant to do with it in terms of, capturing Kesari, because Kesari had been eluding him for a while. So there was that plot hole. There are other that did not connect essentially, and there are plot holes tied to the book, I should say. And there are other plot holes, like I said, numerous ones in this film. If I start to mention them, we'll be here for a while. Finally, the characterization of Kesari himself. His whole thing is that he's reincarnated. He's a deity, right? From way back. He's lived on this earth several times. He now comes into this age, he's reborn, grows up, and he now joins a gang of thieves. And his whole thing is to steal from corrupt rich people and take their money and redistribute it amongst the common man. Okay, but we don't really see much of him doing things for the common man. We don't feel like he really has a heart for the poor or for the downtrodden. What we do see is him living large with the members of his robbery gang. Qui devrait le voir? If you're a fan of any of the big stars in this movie, and there are lots of big stars in this film, I think you'll enjoy this movie. I said in my Jagun review that I had never heard of Ibrahim Yekini, aka Itele, prior to Jagun, and in the comments of that review, lots of people told me how popular the guy is and how they love his films and how he has like a huge fan base. So I think they're the ones who will really go out and see this film or will enjoy the film. Also, the fans of people like Femi Adebayo, Adedimeji, Lateef, Yvonne, Jegede, and so on, I think they will really enjoy this film too. I also think that people who are really big fans of Yollywood, I believe it's called, i.e. Yoruba Nollywood, I think they will really enjoy this film because they're not very picky from what I know about fans of Yoruba Nollywood. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're not very picky about, a story making sense or characters being well developed and all that. So if you're a fan of Yoruba Nollywood on a good day, then I think you'll enjoy this film, Kesari, too. In conclusion, I don't think this movie is to be taken too seriously. In fact, I don't think the actors in this movie take this movie too seriously either. So if you're not looking for anything too intense, too hectic, or that makes a whole lot of sense, something just light to watch, then you just might enjoy Kesari. I certainly enjoyed it more than I enjoyed Orisha a few weeks ago. And if Orisha can do like 100 million, from what I've heard, over 100 million in the box office, I don't see why Kesari can't do as much or even more. Now, I also want to talk about this whole Yoruba Nollywood thing and the observation or the notion that lots of Yoruba Nollywood actors do this collaboration or trade by barter thing. For example, there's a belief that many of the actors in Jagun, who were also in Kesari, it was a case of, okay, don't pay me to do this your film, or pay me a discount to do this your film, but you also do my film as well, either for free or at a discount. It's like some kind of like an agreement or a collaboration. You see it a lot in Yoruba Nollywood. That's why you see lots of actors working together, and they're, at the end of the day, they're friends, they're collaborators, and they do lots of films together. I think they give each other like maybe discounted rates when they work for one another, or like I said earlier, it's a case of, on your film you don't need to pay me, but you're also going to do my film, and I won't pay you for that. Do you agree? And I think that kind of arrangement, it works for them. But according to Cinema Pointer's review of this same film, Kesari, this system of collaboration within Nollywood, which I think some people they call it parapo, which means sort of let's come together and just make it happen, right? According to Cinema Pointer, this whole system is breeding mediocrity, in Nollywood, particularly with our films. Let me read what Cinema Pointer had to say. It's been a while since I read anything from Cinema Pointer in one of my reviews. Absolutely not recommended. It has long been rumored that this modus operandi in Yoruba Nollywood is trade by barter, a favor for favor system. This tradition of you act in my movie and I'll act in your movie in lieu of professional fees engenders a cancerous form of emotional blackmail that prevents untalented filmmakers from being weeded out to burn eternally in the flames of failure where they deserve to be. Gotta respect the penmanship of whoever wrote this caption. This cancer of emotional blackmail is the only reason virtually all the brightest shining stars, the very best male actors in Yoruba Nollywood, will come together to make Kesari, a movie so disgracefully embarrassing it can only be objectively, logically, and truthfully described as entertainment malfeasance. We could just have cried in this review, but we couldn't in good conscience let this artistic criminality go without addressing it in writing. The past favors sycophancy and a particularly virulent spirit of I don't want to embarrass my friendism will force men who individually are otherwise highly talented actors, and in one case maybe the best movie producer in the history of Nollywood, to succumb to acting out an iconically childish script into a movie with terrible acting performances, ear-scratching dialogue. The dialogue was quite tacky in Kesari, I can't lie. Horrendous looking costumes and basic shooting scenes with wooden props for guns is worrisome. Kesari should be investigated. It is worse than Ijakumo. I have to stop you there. No, I do not agree. I'm yet to see a film that's worse than Ijakumo. But to Cinema Pointer's point of Yoruba Nollywood and this whole collaboration thing and paddy thing, as we call it here in Nigeria, it being a bad thing, I see their point of it creating or incubating mediocrity, right? But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It happens everywhere where friends make movies together, particularly when they're coming up. But many of these actors are really established performers. But it does produce a lot of good films, particularly in Yoruba Nollywood. This whole system that Cinema Pointer has condemned is pretty much behind why we saw a really good film like Jagun just a few weeks ago. So while I do see their points, I think it's a situation of you have to just take the good with the bad. Collaboration is a good thing, especially when it fosters creativity and dynamism. Although it can work contrary to the point, because if you're seeing the same actors working together in multiple films, where's the dynamism in that? But like I said, I think it's a case of you just have to take the good with the bad. Anyway, finally guys, let me rate this movie, Kesari. I'll give it 1.5 jollofs over 5. I don't think it's worth 2. I'm tempted to give it 2, but let's just stick with 1.5 jollofs over 5. If you enjoyed watching this review, please like it by clicking on the like button just underneath the video, and subscribe to my channel as well by clicking on the black subscribe button. It's really important that you do those two things, because you doing those things will help this channel and this video grow. And YouTube is all about growing your numbers and growing the engagement. So please, let's engage with the content a lot more by leaving a comment behind underneath the video, liking the video, sharing it with friends and family as well. Also, many of you watching are not subscribed. Please, it will cost you nothing. You won't get spammed by me if you subscribe to the channel. Just hit that subscribe button underneath the video. On this channel, I don't just do Nollywood movie reviews. I also talk about relationships, and I also have an awesome podcast called the 30-Minute Podcast. To check my other Nollywood movie reviews, my relationship videos, or my awesome podcast, I really recommend that podcast. Please check it out. You can click the card in the corner of the screen for a link to any of those things, particularly the playlists, right, to the Nollywood reviews or the podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been awesome. If you've seen Kesari, let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below. Also, let me know what you think about Yoruba Nollywood and all the, parapo and the collaboration thing that happens with Yoruba Nollywood. Thanks for the final time, guys. I will see you in the next one. Take care.